Most people think pressure in geopolitics comes from power. It doesn't. It comes from position. If you map the Baltic ports, the Black Sea exits, and the rail corridors running through Eastern Europe, you start seeing something uncomfortable. Leverage doesn't flow evenly across space. It concentrates. That's why headlines about sanctions, speeches, or military aid only tell part of the story. The real limits on U.S. pressure are structural. They're embedded in geography, energy routes, and legacy infrastructure. This isn't about political will. It's about systems that resist outside control. We'll walk through this step by step, showing how each constraint compounds the next. And the final reason isn't the one most people expect. Each decision closes future options. Each delay tightens the system. By the end of this video, you'll understand why Russia's strategic depth absorbs external pressure. 150 words. Russia's strategic depth isn't abstract. It's visible at the Moscow rail hub, along the Ural industrial belt, and inside Kaliningrad's fortified corridor. Pressure arrives at the edges, then fades before reaching the core. For decades, factories moved east, command nodes dispersed, supply routes layered inland. When sanctions appear, they meet distance. Pause here. This is where assumptions fail. Washington applies leverage from borders and airspace. Moscow absorbs it across 11 time zones. Not reach, position. The choice isn't dramatic, it's passive. Western strategy defaults to perimeter containment because interior access doesn't exist. The consequence is quiet. No single choke point forces compliance. Pressure forms but doesn't land. Options narrow. Direct coercion leaves the table, and the economic system will expose that weakness faster than any battlefield ever could. Next comes energy, where geography hardens into dependency. Subscribe to Global War's timeline for serious historical geopolitical analysis every week. For deeper context, globally energy infrastructure forces compromise before compliance at the Baumgarten gas hub in Austria. Pressure becomes arithmetic. Pipelines don't care about speeches. Nord Stream, Ukrainian transit lines, and storage caverns were built to run for decades, not election cycles. Europe feels the shock first. Households, factories, grids, pause. This is where timelines diverge. Washington tightens sanctions. Berlin counts megawatts. Paris watches inflation, not punishment, endurance. Russia doesn't need victory here, it needs continuity. Tankers reroute, contracts renegotiate. Prices rise, coalition patience falls. The decision is slow, almost invisible. Allies hedge instead of sever. That delay matters. Energy costs fracture unity before Moscow feels isolation. What could have been a clean economic squeeze becomes a negotiated compromise. Options narrow quietly. Full embargo becomes politically toxic. Subsidies replace pressure. Strategic clarity dissolves into price caps and exemptions. Maps explain it better than press conferences. Energy corridors lock behavior. That's when leverage fades and alternatives quietly disappear across allied capitals. Financial decoupling arrives after adaptation inside Russia's SBFS payment network and the Mir card system. Isolation meets engineering. These weren't emergency creations. They followed 2014, built slowly, tested quietly. Sanctions arrive. Substitutions already exist. Pause, this is where speed fails. Western banks disconnect. Domestic rails reconnect. Not disruption, absorption. Imports fall, but parallel channels open through Shanghai clearing houses and Istanbul traders. Software updates localize. Components reroute. What looks like financial shock becomes operational friction. The delay was decisive. By the time restrictions scale, adaptation is normal. Consumers adjust. Firms restructure. The state coordinates. Options narrow again. Total financial quarantine becomes impractical. Secondary sanctions threaten allies more than Moscow. Pressure spreads outward, not inward. Control turns probabilistic. Maps now give way to systems. Payment rails, chip sourcing, logistics platforms. Each layer adds insulation. And when economics can't force outcomes anymore, attention shifts toward military limits. Ladders on approaching battlefront lines. Nuclear deterrence caps escalation before pressure peaks. Kaluga's missile production facilities and Russia's Arctic submarine bastions exist for one purpose: to end arguments before they begin. Strategic parity changes everything. Here's the contradiction. The United States holds overwhelming conventional power, yet it cannot fully apply it. Pause, this is where ceilings appear. Every escalation step carries existential risk. Airspace stays contested but untouched. Ground forces remain indirect. Aid replaces intervention, not dominance, timing. Russia operates beneath nuclear thresholds, calibrating moves just low enough to avoid triggering direct confrontation. Washington responds with weapons transfers, not divisions. The decision isn't debated publicly. It's assumed. The consequence is structural. Military pressure remains incomplete by design. Red lines stabilize behavior more than any treaty. Options narrow again. Direct coercion disappears. What remains is managed conflict. Maps still matter here. Bastions protect launch survivability. Distance preserves deterrence. Geography shields strategy. And because force can't finish this, logistics quietly take over. Where routes matter more than rockets. Interior supply routes defeat external blockades. The Trans-Siberian rail line doesn't make headlines. Neither does the Volga River corridor. But together they explain why sieges don't work on continental powers. Russia doesn't rely on ocean lifelines the way island states do. Supplies move inward, not outward. Pause. This is where blockade logic breaks. Fuel, food, ammunition, and industrial inputs travel across protected land networks buffered by distance and redundancy. Ports can be pressured. Rail nodes simply reroute, not speed, endurance. Western interdiction focuses on maritime choke points. Russia shifts volume internally. The war economy stabilizes behind its borders while external trade becomes optional. The decision is quiet. Domestic logistics replace global dependence. The consequence follows. Isolation turns symbolic. Production clusters stay active. Military resupply continues. Options narrow again. There's no naval-style containment possible. No clean cutoff. Pressure leaks away into thousands of kilometers of track and road. Maps now reveal something uncomfortable. Interior mobility beats perimeter control. Next comes the markets that absorb what the West walks away from. Global South trade absorbs Western withdrawal at Shanghai's Yangshan port and across Mumbai's commodity exchanges. Russian exports find new gravity. Oil, fertilizers, metals, flows don't stop, they redirect. This is the consequence most sanctions models underestimate. Pause, markets don't disappear, they migrate. Europe reduces intake, India increases it. China refinances shipping, insurance shifts, payment terms adjust, not isolation, reorientation. Washington pressures allies, but large parts of the world operate outside that framework. Price discounts compensate for reputational risk. Volume replaces margin. The decision unfolds commercially, not politically. Traders move first. Governments follow. The result is structural. Western withdrawal creates openings others fill. Russia trades less profitably but consistently. Options narrow again. Universal pressure becomes impossible. Secondary sanctions threaten global supply chains more than Moscow. Control fractures across jurisdictions. Maps now expand beyond Europe. Tanker routes arc toward Asia. Influence thins with distance. And once trade realigns, technology becomes the next gatekeeper. Domestic substitution outpaces external control inside Russia's defense manufacturing clusters and semiconductor assembly lines. Replacement happens faster than restriction. Components vanish. Alternatives appear. This isn't elegance, it's persistence. Pause, here's the limitation. Western export controls target precision. Russia responds with volume, improvisation, and state coordination. Civilian chips migrate into military systems. Machine tools get repurposed. Supply chains shorten, not sophistication, adaptation. The choice is forced, not strategic. Domestic production expands because imports shrink. Quality drops in places, quantity compensates. The consequence matters. Weapons keep moving, communications stay functional, surveillance degrades but doesn't collapse. Options narrow again. Technological isolation loses bite once baseline capability stabilizes. Sanctions assumed dependency. Industry built resilience. Control becomes statistical. Factory floors now replace trading desks as pressure points. Each substitution layer reduces external influence. And when technology no longer blocks momentum, The constraint shifts back to force. How much military effort can be sustained without crossing thresholds? Regional focus outlasts global reach at the Zapad training ranges, and along the Black Sea Fleet's operating zones, Russia fights where it already stands. This isn't expansion, it's concentration. The limitation is asymmetric. Pause, the United States operates globally. Russia operates locally, not reach. Position. For Washington, every deployment competes with another theater. Europe, the Middle East, the Pacific, resources stretch. Attention fragments. For Moscow, the fight sits next door. Rail, fuel, command, repair, all within known distance. The decision imbalance matters. Russia can sustain pressure regionally without overextension. The U.S. must manage escalation across alliances, basing rights, and rotational forces. The consequence tightens options. Long-term military pressure becomes costly for the side projecting power, not the side defending space. Presence replaces momentum. Maps make this visible. Short supply lines versus global logistics chains. Familiar terrain versus expeditionary planning. Once endurance favors proximity, escalation slows. What remains is containment, not coercion. And containment introduces the next constraint. Buffer states that delay pressure before it ever reaches Moscow. Buffer states delay direct pressure transfer. Belarus forms a land bridge. The Caucasus offers mountain corridors. These aren't diplomatic abstractions. They're spatial buffers. Here's the consequence. Pressure doesn't travel in straight lines. Pause. Between NATO positions and Russian interior nodes sit intermediary territories that absorb friction. Troop movements slow. Surveillance gaps widen. Supply routes stretch. Not immediacy, delay. These spaces buy Moscow time to reposition assets, harden infrastructure, and manage escalation. The decision is structural. The United States must negotiate access, coordinate partners, and respect sovereignty. Russia operates through proximity. The result is strategic lag. Every action takes longer to materialize. Every response arrives partially diluted. Options narrow again. Rapid pressure becomes impossible. Direct signaling blurs. Maps now show layered distance, alliance borders, neutral corridors, contested zones. And as these buffers hold, political cohesion starts carrying more weight than hardware. Because pressure finally reaches the alliance itself, political time runs out before structural pressure does. This is where everything converges. Democratic systems move on election clocks. Russia plans on generational ones. Budgets reset. Cabinets change, public attention drifts, not speed. Endurance, pause. By now, energy has rerouted, finance adapted, industry substituted, military escalation capped itself. What remains is alliance management, and that's the deepest constraint. Coalitions require constant reinforcement. Domestic politics introduces hesitation. Partners recalibrate priorities. Every month adds friction. Every compromise weakens alignment. The consequence is long-term. Pressure mechanisms outlive political patience. Russia doesn't need rapid success. It needs strategic continuity. Over time, power stops meaning force projection. It becomes positional survival inside constrained systems. This conflict rewrites coercion doctrine globally. It proves that modern pressure fails when geography, infrastructure, and time align against it. Not dominance, duration. Understanding that changes how wars are measured and how future strategy will be built. Subscribe to Global Wars Timeline for serious historical geopolitical analysis every week.